Okay, here is a video to help you understand how to do the Skittles stoichiometry video. Okay, the first and most important sentence that you need to read is right here on the paper where it says, before you begin, open your bag of Skittles and determine the number of each that you have. This is your starting material for all problems. Okay, so you need to actually open the bag and count and find out how many of each Skittle do I have. So do I have, like 13 red and 20 orange, okay? You need to know those numbers because they're going to be important as we try to solve problems, as you can't determine which substance is a limiting reactant unless you know how much of each starting product you are beginning with. That will change the answer to your problem, okay? So let's look at this first problem right here, okay? Simplest equation. To begin with, we did this when we tried the lab the first time, okay? You're just going to write your simplest form of the balanced equation that you can. So in this one, we know we have to have red and we have to have orange, and the end product has to be red-orange, the compound. Okay? We also know from looking at the table up above that neither of these are diatomic, so we don't need to make either of them diatomic, which means that this is just a straightforward synthesis reaction where two things combine into one thing. And that means that this equation is balanced the way it is. So it's going to take one red plus one orange to make one red-orange. Okay? So now, for question number 2, they say, how many of the products can you make using the Skittles you have? This is why you have to know your starting materials. Okay? So if you have 13 red Skittles and 20 orange Skittles, okay, how many can you make? You can only make 13 because it takes one of each. And after you make 13 compounds, you will run out of red. You will not have any more. So you will only be able to make 13 red-orange compounds. And then that helps us answer question number 3, which is which reactant or starting material limited the amount of product that you could make? The red Skittles did. And which reactant was in excess? Well, our orange reactant was in excess, and they want to know by how much. So to answer that, we're going to take the number of oranges that we have and subtract how many we used to make products to wind up with our answer. So we will have 7 leftover orange Skittles. But you can see now why it would be important to know how many of each you had. It'd be impossible to do these questions without it, which is why we had so much trouble the first time. Okay, so now you know how to do part A, which means you should be able to do part B and part C on your own because they are the same thing. You just have to write a different reaction and you're using a different substance. It's when we get to part D that we start changing things up. Part D wants you to give the masses of each Skittle. So in order to get mass, we have to use the Skittle mass, aka molar mass, that they have given you in the table up here, okay? So let's use our example of 13 red Skittles, okay? And you can see here on the table that the Skittle mass is 1.05 grams for every Skittle you have. So if we come back down to part D, and we'll do part D number 3, because that's where the red Skittles are at, you're gonna go ahead and take 13 red Skittles times 1.05 grams per Skittle in order to get your mass of Skittles that you have, and it should come out to about 13.65. So that would be the number that would go right here, and you would write grams of red Skittle. Okay, so you're going to do that for each of your colors. There's 5 questions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for each of the colors of Skittles in your bag. So you'll take the counted number that you have of how many of each Skittle did you have and multiply it by the Skittle mass to get your mass of that color. Okay, now we can scroll down to the next type of question. Okay, for part I guess that we're calling this part A again. I don't know why. They want you to find total mass of each product formed. So just like you would calculate a molar mass for a compound, you can calculate the Skittle mass for a compound by combining the Skittle masses for each of the substances. So for this first one, we're going to take the Skittle mass for R, which we said was 1.05, and combine it with the Skittle mass for orange, which is 0.97, okay? And that would come out to about 2.02, and then you're going to take that times the number of that compound that you formed. So in this case, that was 13. And that would give you your mass of ROR formed, red-orange formed, which would come out to about 26.26, and that would be grams of the compound. Okay, and you're going to do that for each of the compounds. So you'll have to find their Skittle masses, and then you'll have to take it times the amount of product. All right, for this next part, you're going to go back to those first three parts and look at the amount of excess reactant that you said you had, okay? So they want that amount, but now they want it in grams instead of in number of Skittles. So, for example, for part A, we said we had 7 Skittles left over. Remember that these are my numbers and that your numbers might not match up because you have different numbers of Skittles in your bag, but it's the same principle. Okay, so I had 7 Skittles left over that were orange, so I'm going to take that times their Skittle mass to come out with my grams left over. Okay, and that'd be grams of orange that I had left over. Okay, and you'll do that for part B and part C. Excuse me. So you're just going back up to parts A through C, finding out how many you said you had left over, multiplying it to get your grams left over. The last thing they want you to do is go back to part D, which I don't think is labeled part D, which might be something that caused the confusion. So if we go back up to part D, which is this right here, where we're giving total grams of each, okay, they want you to use your answer for part D, number 5, okay, which is total mass of all the yellow Skittles, okay? So they want you to calculate how many grams of red Skittles you would need in order to react with all of the yellow Skittles that you had available. So you would take your grams of yellow Skittles that you said you had, convert it into number of Skittles, use your balanced equation to convert to figure out how many red Skittles you would need, and then convert back to mass of red Skittles. And then you're just repeating this process for question number 7, but instead of using grams of yellow Skittles like you did in part 5, you're going to look at part 3, which was grams of red Skittles. So you'll take your grams of red Skittles, multiply it to figure out how many grams of yellow Skittles you would need, or how many total red Skittles, use that, your equation, to figure out how many yellow Skittles you need, and then multiply that by their molar mass to figure out how many grams of yellow Skittles you would need if you were going to react just with the entirety of that mass of red Skittles that you had. So it's just like a mass-to-mass conversion in stoichiometry, but instead you're doing it with Skittles. All right, I hope this clears up some of your questions. As always, I will still field questions from you that you have when I am back on Thursday.